Next item, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, returning to the agenda. Legislative Bill 143, introduced by Senator Conrad. It's a bill for an act relating to time. Provides for year-round daylight savings time as prescribed, harmonized provisions, and repeals the original section. Bill is read for the first time on January 6th of last year and referred to the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. Mr. President, when the legislature left the bill, pending was the bill itself as well as an amendment from Senator Erdman, FA 207.
Senator Conrad, you're recognized for a 1-minute refresh on the bill.
Good. Thank you so much, Mr. President. And just briefly, colleagues, and I'll punch in again here, but this is a measure I picked up from Senator Briese. It would allow for Nebraska to follow a gradual process as envisioned and allowed under federal law to petition for change from the practice wherein we change our clocks twice a year to move to daylight saving time year-round upon the approval of 4 adjacent states and the federal government. Senator Erdman has filed an amendment to do another thing allowable under federal law, and that would be to move to standard time immediately, as our sister states in Arizona and Hawaii do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator Erdman, you're recognized for a 1-minute refresh.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Good morning. Senator Conrad fairly stated what we're trying to do here. It's quite obvious that changing our clocks twice a year is detrimental to people's health, and it takes a while to adjust to that, even if you do. And so what my amendment does is stay on standard time year-round, and that's basically the sum of what I'm trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you again, Mr. President. Last week, we had an opportunity to talk about standard time as being the permanent time. We had comments made about the states around us that have already selected to stay on daylight savings time. We have one adjustment that they're trying to make in the state of Wyoming. The state of Wyoming did approve daylight savings time as their permanent time, and they are in the process of repealing that and going back to standard time. So the only state around us, if they accomplish that task, will be Colorado. And as has been stated several times on this floor, that can never happen until Congress makes that designation. And I want to draw your attention to something about that. In 1973, Congress adopted daylight savings time as the time that would remain year-round. Early in 1974, they repealed that. They seen the negatives of going to daylight savings time year-round, and they repealed it in 1974. So if history has anything to do with it, Congress in the near future, or even in the far distant future, will not approve daylight savings time. And I passed out a document to everybody in the room that has a map that shows how many days the sun will come up after 8 o'clock and where it comes up, when it comes up now if we stay on standard time. I want to bring your attention to the fact that over one half of the state will have over 100 days when the sun comes up after 8 o'clock. And if you look at the map that I presented to you, if you look at that group of counties, starting with Cherry County at the top to the southern border, they will have 140 days that the sun will come up after 8 o'clock. And the latest it will come up in December in that region is 9/10. So if you live in Valentine, Nebraska, if daylight saving times become the permanent time, the sun will arise at 9:10 a.m. There is significant issues with having the sun come up after 9 o'clock anywhere in the state. And you'll notice even in Lincoln, Nebraska, under this proposal, you'll have 120 days that the sun will come up after 8 o'clock. So it's an issue that we have to deal with that is unforeseen if you don't look at the map. And so as you look at that map and you draw your own conclusions about what daylight savings time will mean to this region where the most population live, it is a problem. And so going to permanent time, we can do that without congressional approval. It's an opportunity for us to not change our clock twice a day. It is also an opportunity for us to improve people's health because of the time change, as well as adjusting to the time change. And so, as I mentioned last week, some of the things that you need to take into consideration, and as I said this morning earlier to some people I was speaking with, is follow the science. And the science proves that changing to daylight savings time is detrimental to your health. So some of the comments that you'll see in that same document that I sent out, that had passed out, is permanent daylight saving time is the worst option. And I would say if you do not adopt standard time as being the year-round time, you need to stay with what you have. Because if you don't stay with the current system where we fall back into standard time in the wintertime, you're going to have that darkness as I described earlier. But permanent daylight saving time is the worst option of all. And so as we move forward, you need to make a decision about what's best for people's health, what people have requested. And I understand that the recreational people are very upset about going to standard time year-round. But that is the opportunity that we find ourselves in. We can make this decision today. We don't have to have any approval from the government, and we can go to standard time. And Wyoming will be, if that passes in Wyoming, they'll be on the same time we are. So I seen an article written by how many times you have to change your clock after we change to standard time and say Colorado just goes to mountain time or to daylight savings time. And I don't think it makes any difference when you're going for the 150 or 200 miles across the state from the standard time to mountain time, that it'll make a difference how many times you have to change your clock. People understand, they'll get used to it, and they'll understand that the time is what it is. And I thought that was an interesting article that Senator John Kavanaugh passed out this morning about who described or discovered or set in place the time zones we have, and it was the railroad. So I would ask for your green vote for once and for all not to have to change our clocks twice a year. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, and thanks to my friend Senator Erdman for his thoughtful explanation of his amendment. Multiple constituents, colleagues, stakeholders have said, what are you going to do in regards to Senator Erdman's amendment? I do consider this a friendly amendment. I do consider this an important policy choice for the legislature. I think this is an excellent policy discussion. And to be clear, the reason I was always such an enthusiastic supporter of Senator Briese's measure and then an enthusiastic co-sponsor of his measure before I picked it up after he was appointed state treasurer is because when you look at the polling, when you talk to your neighbors, well north of 60% of Americans are tired of changing our clocks twice a year. It is disruptive from a health perspective, from a conservation perspective, from a parenting perspective, and it definitely impacts economic issues as well. That being said, LB 143, as introduced by Senator Briese, follows a gradual approach allowed under federal law that about 20 of our sister states have also adopted to adopt permanent daylight saving time upon the agreement of adjacent states and the federal government. Also allowable under federal law, as evidenced in Senator Erdman's amendment, is for states to make an immediate change to standard time, as is in place in Hawaii and in Arizona. Colleagues, just to refresh your recollection and in good faith to opponents who have contacted me, there was robust discussion at the committee level. That discussion has continued on the floor, lifting up legitimate concerns from our partners in the golf industry and the broadcasting industry, which talked about how if Senator Erdman's amendment were adopted, that may impact their business, recreational opportunities for Nebraskans, and broadcasting and programming issues for Nebraskans. I am going to support Senator Erdman's amendment, and I'm going to support the underlying bill, whether his amendment is adopted or not. My primary goal is to effectuate a way for us to stop with the significant disruptions in changing our clocks twice a year. I've read the studies from both sides about what option is the best. I think that they have merit. I think that they are well researched. And I also think it's a close call. I definitely think there are positive attributes and potential unintended consequences from choosing either option, whether that's permanent daylight saving time or setting our clocks solely to standard time. That being said, I specifically wanted to bring this forward because as a mom of two little ones, I know how disruptive that twice a year time change used to be for their nap schedules, used to be for their sleep schedules, and is still hard on them today, even though they're a little bit older now and don't require naps most days. But I have heard a lot of great feedback from constituents about how they agree that changing our clocks twice a year is disruptive for a variety of reasons. That's the easy part. And then people of goodwill definitely have strong feelings about the best way to go about it. Senator Erdman's amendment would allow us to move immediately.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. LB 143, as originally introduced and advanced, follows a more gradual process. With that, I'm happy to answer questions. I hope that we can get to a vote on this today. It's been languishing on the agenda a bit as we've attended to other matters, but I think it would be great to get a vote and move forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Speaker Arch, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would agree with Senator Conrad. We've talked quite a bit about this over time, but I have a question for Senator Conrad. I want to make a statement. If she would just, I want to make sure I'm thinking correctly on this. So, as I see it, we in the body here have three choices. We can do nothing, in other words, and that would be a no vote on everything, including 143. We can do daylight standard time permanent, which is really a trigger bill. Some other conditions would have to occur. So that would be a no on FA 207, a yes on 143, a yes on the underlying bill. And that would be sometime in the future, like I say, a trigger, right? And then there would be a permanent central standard time, yes on FA 207, which would amend, and then yes on the bill. And that would take effect, and this is my question, when? The effective date of the bill? Is that when that would take effect? But those are the three options that I see right now in front of the body as far as votes go. And I just wanted to make sure, I just want to confirm that with you, Senator Conrad, and in particular, the effective date, if we vote yes on the floor amendment, the effective date of that. So if Senator Conrad would yield to a question.
Senator Conrad, would you yield to a question?
Yes,
So-
of course.
Yes, so Senator Conrad, you heard my three options. First of all, is that correct? Those are the three options in front of us.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then effective date on the floor amendment, what would be the effective date for that?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so my understanding, and I'll clarify if I'm wrong here, but LB 143 does not have an emergency clause. So if Senator Erdman's floor amendment were to be adopted and would reflect the body's decision to move immediately to standard time as is allowable, it would take effect approximately 3 months after it were signed into law by the governor under our current practice.
Okay. And daylight savings time, if LB 143 were to be adopted without the floor amendment, nothing would happen immediately. That would sit and wait for some of the other conditions to be met surrounding states, those types of things, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Speaker, 100% right. So if floor amendment 207 is rejected and 143 moves forward, that would take effect in Nebraska 3 months after it was signed by the governor, as is our practice, and then no action would happen until 3 adjacent states around Nebraska also adopt that practice. Currently, Colorado and Wyoming have. Other neighbors are immersed in discussions as we speak. And then Congress must also act. Those are the two contingents that must occur if LB 143 goes forward without Senator Erdman's amendment. So it would be a much more gradual process and uncertain at best, but would follow the path that I think about 19 of our sister states have moved in as they've joined this effort over the last 5 years.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Conrad. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator Murman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I rise today in support of Senator Erdman's FA 207 and Standard Time. Ensuring we have sunny mornings may seem like a simple convenience issue, but the reality is it's a public health issue and a public safety issue. Our bodies and brains have a natural need for sunlight in the day and dark in the night. In this case, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I can read their opinion and defer to them. Professor of Neurology from Washington University, St. Louis, Raman Malhotra, writes that permanent daylight savings time is the worst option. Permanent standard time is more natural for our bodies and the best option for our health. A professor from University of Colorado, Kenneth Wright, writes, all evidence suggests permanent standard time is going to be healthier. So why is this? Because our body has a natural wake, work, and sleep rhythm. Permanent standard time is closer aligned with that. Permanent daylight savings time is not. So we are not aligned with that natural rhythm and instead follow daylight savings time. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine writes there could be an increased chance of chronic sleep loss leading to risks of obesity, cardiovascular disease, and depression. I have a list with me of about 40 professional or academic health organizations who have endorsed permanent standard time as the best year-round clock for these reasons. This is not just a health issue, but also a safety issue. With permanent daylight savings time, we see a dangerous combination of sleep-deprived drivers and children walking to school in the dark. To give some examples, allow me to read some headlines and portions from newspapers when we last passed permanent daylight savings time back in 1974. If you're curious about seeing these articles, I'm happy to show them to you. Schoolgirl hurt, accident blamed on time change is one. Children had to meet their school buses in darkness, confronting traffic, still relying on headlights. Children's deaths spur bid to repeal daylight savings. A girl 6 critically injured in an accident. School children exposed to danger is another headline. I have personal experience quite often driving through small towns and around rural Nebraska when kids are getting on the school bus early in the morning when it's dark, and I can verify it's much more dangerous at that time when they have to get on the bus, whether it's in town or out in the country in the dark. And if there's even just a little bit of daylight, it makes it much safer. Don't take my word for it. Let's see what the Academy of Sleep Medicine says. Standard time ensures more light and promotes safety in the morning. For morning commuters and children heading off to school, dark mornings caused by permanent daylight savings time pose numerous safety concerns. More darkness during early morning commutes may also contribute to an increased risk of traffic fatalities. I appreciate Senator Conrad's comment that changing the clock is a big issue also, but we got to follow what health and safety experts say, and that's the reason I have strong support for permanent standard time. Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. More so, we can learn the past and look to why, when Congress did pass permanent daylight savings time, we quickly got rid of it, as Senator Erdman mentioned. For these reasons, I believe Senator Erdman's FA 207 is the best way to approach this issue. And I yield back my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murman. Senator Jacobson, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. I've thought about this quite a bit. I've gotten a lot of emails on this issue and other issues. One thing I've learned loud and clear from my constituents is don't mess with our time, okay? And so I think we've concluded, as others have said, that moving the clocks forward and backward, people are sick of. People are telling us, I think, loud and clear, we don't want to do this anymore. So we want to go one way or the other. And I think we've learned, and I think Senator Erdman has outlined it very well, as has Senator Conrad, who brought a bill that was basically going to make permanent daylight savings times, and decided what the worst part of this is, as I think has been articulated, is we don't want to keep moving our clocks back and forth. So let's pick one and go with it. And I think it's the right move forward to adopt FA 207 and then pass the bill 143. We're done moving our clocks. We're on standard time now. We would just stay there. Living where I do in North Platte, I can tell you that I'm pretty close to the Mountain Time standard time zone change. Part of my district's in Mountain Time, part of my district's in Central Time. That's messing things up enough. Let's don't be moving the clocks around too. So I'm going to support FA 207 and also LB 143. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Albright, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, we're going to find out that we all come from different parts of the state, and we all have different needs. I, of course, am in Northeast Nebraska, which would affect, obviously, the South Dakota, Iowa area that we do business in. But I just want to just put on the record, Jim Tim, the president and executive director of the Nebraska Broadcasters Association, had sent me a letter, and I think it's important to read through the programming disruptions, station programming that Nebraskans count on hearing or viewing in certain times of the day would be disrupted. Further, many of the Nebraska radio and TV stations are relied upon for news, weather, and information by commuters and other residents of bordering states. Permanent standard time would negatively impact citizens, businesses, and stations in communities such as Omaha, Scottsbluff, Falls City, Superior, McCook, Chadron, and Valentine, to name a few. On the AM radio access, the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, requires most AM stations to reduce their operating power or cease operating between sunset and sunrise in order to avoid interference with other AM stations. Permanent standard time would reduce their broadcast reach in the winter months, leaving people without news and programming that they count on, while causing stations to lose operating revenue that they need to keep them in business. And on the TV broadcast schedules, their risk of FCC fines. Operating on clocks different from our neighboring states would impact the broadcast times of live sporting events, and live telecast. Further, TV stations programming may comply with FCC rules for the time a program is permitted to be on the air in one state, but could violate the safe harbor rules in another. Panhandle residents who receive TV newscasts from Denver stations would have to wait an hour later to see them. The Nebraska Broadcast Association Board of Directors understands that people are tired of changing their clocks twice a year for a number of reasons, but LB 143 will achieve that goal without significantly disrupting the service and information that people count on from Nebraska's local radio and TV stations. So he's asking, please vote no on the permanent standard time. And then I also had a letter from Wayne, Nebraska, David Kelly, the owner of the KTCH and KCTY stations. He said he understands that the legislature is looking to adopt permanent standard time for Nebraska. While the twice-a-year time change is inconvenient to many, the proposal of 143, LB 143, will create an even more chaos by establishing Nebraska as an island. This move will especially be inconvenient for us here in the Northeast Nebraska, given the close connections with the Sioux City area and access to commerce in South Dakota and Iowa. Appreciate your understanding of how this will affect the constituents. So I personally don't have an issue with the changing of the times. We have all 4 different seasons. I do care a lot about the children, but you either put the kids to bed earlier or later, and it lasts for 2 or 3 days. It's not a big deal to me, but I'm just in favor of keeping it the way it is. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Albrecht. Senator Clements, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. have been surprised with the number of people that say it's so hard to change the clock back and forth twice a year. I did appreciate Senator Erdman's handout on the third page, talking about why the permanent daylight savings time was repealed from 1974 because of children's lives being taken by sleep-deprived drivers driving in the dark. The bottom right-hand panel talks about most work in school starts at 8 a.m. and at 8 a.m. daylight savings time, January 16th in Omaha is dark. But with standard time, 8 a.m. in Omaha is daylight. And also, I do appreciate daylight savings time in the summertime. My family does outdoor activities then, and I would prefer the system that we currently have. So I'm going to vote no on the FA 207 and then no on LB 143. I prefer to leave things the way they are. We've been doing it this way 50 years now, I believe, roughly. And I think it's been a good system. And so I'm asking your red vote on FA 207 and red on LB 143. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clement. Senator Lippincott announces a guest under the north balcony, Courtney Brandis from Central City, Nebraska. Please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning again. As I listened to the discussion this morning and the reasons that people have for one time or another, it is quite obvious that we're divided on this question. If you believe that if 143 passes without my amendment, that it's going to mean something, you're totally wrong. It means nothing. It's the same as doing absolutely nothing. And I'll tell you why that is. It's because Congress tried this in '73 and it didn't last, making daylight savings time permanent. And if you just think about it for a moment, if we have to have 3 other states adopt daylight saving time as a permanent time, and then Congress has to approve that, do you think Congress is going to approve 3 states in the central part of the United States and 3 states in the West, like Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and then 3 states in the East, or 5 states here? You're totally wrong. They're not going to do that. What will happen if they make a decision on daylight savings time, we won't have to do anything because they will make it nationwide. That will be the decision. The congressional decision will be either standard time everywhere in the United States or nowhere. That's what it's going to be. And so if 207, FA 207 doesn't pass, I'll be voting against LB 143 because it does nothing. It absolutely does nothing. And so I've been told many times in meetings that I've attended, you can't make a negative motion. And that's basically what 143 is without FA 207. And so I think Senator Murman explained the issues very well about the scientific ramifications, the health issues, the safety issues that are going to be dealt with if you make daylight savings time permanent. And so I won't go into that, but I just wanted to make you aware of the fact that it will never happen. It will never happen that 3 states adjacent to Nebraska, or even 3 states including Nebraska, will ever become a time zone of their own. It will never happen. So just let it be known, if you don't pass FA 207, you just will not vote for 143, because it doesn't mean anything, because the same thing happens if you don't pass 143 as we currently have. What we currently have is better. Changing our clock twice a year is better than 143 having permanent daylight savings time. That's plain and simple, straight up truth. So if you haven't looked at that map that I sent out, and you hadn't looked at what Senator Clements alluded to at the bottom of page 2, please do that. And I full well know that probably no discussion we can have on this floor of the legislature is going to change anybody's mind. But we go through this process every time thinking it possibly can. And maybe there's a rare occasion, maybe this will be the time that it does change someone's mind. But anyway, vote green on FA 207. If it doesn't pass, vote no on 143. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. And at this time, I'll yield Senator Erdman my time.
Senator Erdman, you have 4 minutes, 50 seconds.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. You know, Senator Clements made a comment about the information about when it was repealed, this daylight savings time was repealed, and that information is on page 3. And in 1974, from Nebraska State Senator Roman Oruska, he made a motion in Congress against daylight savings time. So we've been talking about daylight savings time and permanent time longer than it took us to repeal the Helmet Law. That's quite a while. And so this is the first time that I know of, and I'm not a historian in the legislature, but I think this is the first time we're going to have an opportunity to vote on this. And so when you make that vote, make sure that you've reviewed that document that I sent, that I distributed, and make sure you understand exactly what your vote means. Your vote means absolutely nothing unless you vote for 207. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Meyer, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. So in 1973, Congress voted to go to year-round daylight savings time, and then shortly thereafter repealed it. Golly, is that the first time Congress got something wrong? I think not. But shortly after that, they finally got it right the next time, and we've been doing that for the last 50 years. If only things in our daily lives were as simple as changing our clocks twice a year. I know my life is much more complicated than that. There's much bigger issues than changing clocks. I think this issue is a much to do about nothing. I have 6 grandchildren that play softball and baseball, and we work long hours on the farming and ranching. And if my grandkids are, I know a couple of the towns they play do not have lights on their field. So that means that we have to quit whatever we're doing at 4 o'clock so they can start their games earlier in the day, or possibly not even have their parents attend their games because it's dark by 8:30 or 9. I just don't see the wisdom of that. All of the quotes that were handed out here on the floor are basically 50 years old. Where else do we listen to scientific facts that are 50 years old? Nowhere. So I would encourage a no vote on both of these issues. As a new state senator, I guess I'm somewhat disappointed that we're spending this much time on something that is so, I'll say, trivial, because I asked my family doctor, is this something that we should be concerned about psychologically or physically? And he said, absolutely not. For normal people, this makes absolutely no difference. The recreation industry, which I think is strong, I think rural Nebraska relies on competition between towns with their children and in all of the sports. And I think following the time regimen we have now just fits very, very well. With the change twice a year, my grandkids get on the school bus when it's light, and they get off when it's light. And I am just not a fan of either one of these bills, and I would encourage your vote no on both of these. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Meyer. Senator Slama, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. While I do agree with most of the United States in that we should at some point stop changing our clocks, I believe this is a federal issue. The problem is if we adopt FA 207 and we move Nebraska immediately to daylight standard time, we're going to be creating Nebraska Standard and Nebraska Mountain Standard Time. And we're going to be on an island. We will have a different time zone than all of our surrounding states. There will be no continuity. We will be on our own. If we want to pass LB 143 and send a message to the federal government that, hey, we want to stop switching our clocks, that's fine. But if we're adopting FA 207 and making Nebraska its literal own island for daylight standard time, like, I don't think people realize how bad of a deal this is going to end up being. Like, Nebraska will be on its own in terms of where our clocks are for certain periods of the year. So I rise wholeheartedly opposed as respectfully as I can be to FA 207. I'm lukewarm on LB 143. I agree with Senator Meyer in that we should be getting to some more important issues than something that's going to be taken care of on a federal level. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Slama. Senator Moser, you're recognized to speak.
Question.
The question has been called. Do I see 5 hands? I do. The question is, shall debate cease? All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
28 days, 2 days to cease debate, Mr. President.
Debate does cease. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to close on FA 207.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to call the House, so when you're ready to vote, everybody's here.
There's been a request to place the House under call. The question is, shall the House go under call? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, record.
34 ayes, 1 nay, Mr. President, place House under call.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to continue your close.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I listened to Senator Slama's comment about we would be an outlier. As you all know, we make adjustments between general and select, and I understood and do understand what she says, that if we put this into effect immediately, it may have an adverse effect on those states that surround us. So it would be wise that after we advance FA 207 and 143, that we make an adjustment to make the date that it takes effect as to 25, in the spring of 25. So that would be my desire when we get this advance from general select, to make that adjustment instead of having it go into effect 3 months after the governor signs it into law. That would put us in a peculiar position. I get that. So vote for 207. We'll make an adjustment between general and select to address that issue. And we will then be the only state in this region that will have, at that time, adopted permanent time as our standard time as our permanent time, except for Wyoming when they get theirs completed. So I ask you to vote green on FA 207. Thank you.
Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, Senator Dungan, please return to the chamber and record your presence. The House is under call. All unexcused members are now present. Members, the question is the adoption of FA 207. All those in favor vote aye. Although roll call has been requested. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar, voting yes. Senator Albrecht, voting no. Senator Arch, voting no. Senator Armendariz, voting no. Senator Ballard, voting no. Senator Blood, voting no. Senator Boston, voting no. Senator Bostar, voting no. Senator Bostelman, voting yes. Senator Brandt, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, not voting. Senator Clements, voting no. Senator Conrad, voting yes. Senator Day, voting no. Senator DeBoer, voting no. Senator DeKay, voting no. Senator Dorn, voting no. Senator Dover, voting no. Senator Dungan, voting no. Senator Erdman, voting yes. Senator Frederickson, voting no. Senator Holleran, voting yes. Senator Hansen, Senator Hardin, voting yes. Senator Holcroft, voting yes. Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Ibaugh, voting no. Senator Jacobson, voting yes. Senator Kauth, voting yes. Senator Linehan, not voting. Senator Lippincott, voting yes. Senator Lowe, voting no. Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator McKinney, voting yes. Senator Meyer, voting no. Senator Moser, voting no. Senator Murman, voting yes. Senator Raybould, Senator Reapy, voting no. Senator Sanders, voting no. Senator Slama, voting no. Senator Vargas, voting yes. Senator Von Gillern, voting no. Senator Walls, voting yes. Senator Wayne, voting yes. Senator Wishart, voting yes. Vote is 19 ayes, 25 nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of FA 207.
FA 207 is not adopted. I raise the call. Returning to the queue, Senator Kauth, you're recognized to speak. Seeing no one else, Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank those who had the common sense to vote yes. I appreciate that. So, as I said earlier, this is now a nothing bill. This does absolutely nothing, okay? So just know if you vote green on this, that your vote is absolutely wasted because this is going to be something that will never be decided by Congress. So I'm voting no, and I encourage you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Clements, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I prefer to keep the daylight savings time, standard time system the way we have it. I believe I did talk to my school superintendent, and he really doesn't want to have kids going to school in the dark in December and January. And that's probably my primary reason for continuing with standard time in the winter. But I still do want, I appreciate the daylight savings time we have in the summertime, but I think it should end in the fall like we do now. So I oppose LB 143 with year-round time, and agree with Senator Erdman that it really wouldn't change anything because it's a federal issue. And so I urge your red vote on LB 143. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Conrad, you're recognized to close.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, and I am delighted that hopefully we'll have a chance to resolve this issue before we break for lunch today, and want to thank everybody who weighed in good faith with passionate, thoughtful arguments in regard to Senator Erdman's amendment and the underlying legislation. A couple points for your consideration on as I urge your advancement and adoption and support of LB 143. This is a measure that Senator Tom Briese brought forward for many years. There is a very diverse set of co-sponsors, including myself, that have added their name to this cycle and in years previous to give voice to their constituents' concerns that they find the twice-a-year practice of changing our clocks disruptive for economic, personal, health, conservation, and a host of different reasons. LB 143 follows a gradual approach allowed under federal law that 19 of our sister states have joined in the past 5 years that allow for an election of permanent daylight saving time upon the enaction by 3 adjacent states and congressional approval. I think that this helps to move forward a gradual, thoughtful way to urge our federal representatives to act quickly and to end the disruptive time change that it seems nobody really enjoys. Okay, not nobody. We heard from some folks that are just fine with the status quo, and they did a great job of sharing why. I actually wanted to make sure to thank Senator Albrecht for giving clear voice to the concerns from the broadcasters. I had that on my to-do list, and she did it in such a fantastic way. So I want to thank her for bringing that forward. I also want to thank Senator Erdman for bringing forward his floor amendment that gave the body an immediate option. And if anybody was concerned about whether or not the nonpartisan spirit was alive and well in the Nebraska Legislature, look no farther than the vote on Senator Erdman's floor amendment. That was really interesting and cool to see how people came together to decide how to cast their vote on that, and in good faith. Finally, I would just let you know that I did receive a note in regards to debate this morning wherein the state chamber wants to add its support for LB 143, which was not reflected on your committee statement. So I just wanted to bring up that late support. I want to thank Senator Briese for his longstanding leadership on this issue, and it's really fun to carry this bill forward. So let's get a vote and hopefully join 19 of our sister states to move towards ending the twice-a-year disruption in the time change. Thank you, Mr. President. I would urge your favorable vote on LB 143.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Members, the question is the advancement to E&R initial of LB 143. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
14 ayes, 15 nays, Mr. President, on advancement of the bill.
Senator Conrad, for what purpose do you?
Yes, I rose to request a call of the House and a roll call vote.
Senator Conrad, the vote's already been called.
I had 6.
Please approach, Senator Conrad. The bill is advanced. Mr. Clerk, for items. Excuse me, the bill fails to advance. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President,